The guard grabbed him by the collar before he even made it through the second set of doors. Not a tap on the shoulder. Not a "Sir, may I help you?" Just two hands on the back of his jacket, yanking him sideways, hard enough that his shoulder hit the marble pillar near the entrance and the folder he was carrying. The one with the blueprints inside. Slid across the lobby floor and fanned open like a broken wing. "You can't be in here," the guard said. Tobias Drummond was 51 years old. He had paint on his work boots and a cracked callus on his right thumb from 23 years of holding a measuring tape. He was wearing a gray Carhartt jacket with a small tear at the left pocket. The kind of jacket a man wears, not because he forgot to dress better, but because he stopped caring whether other people noticed the difference. He turned around slowly. "I have an appointment," he said. "I'm going to need you to step outside." The lobby of Halverson Tower was the kind of place that made people quiet. 40 feet of polished travertine ceiling. A fountain in the center that nobody ever looked at because everything else was louder. The glass, the chrome, the particular way wealth arranges itself in a room so that you feel it before you see it. Two women in blazers walked past with coffee cups and didn't look over. A man on his phone near the elevator bank glanced once and looked away. The guard, his badge said Cole, no first name, just Cole in block letters, had the build of someone who'd played football in high school and never quite let go of it. He was probably 32. He had the kind of confidence that comes not from authority, but from the assumption that authority will back him up. "Sir, I'm not going to ask again." Tobias bent down and picked up the blueprints. He squared them carefully, tapped the edges against the floor twice, and slid them back into the folder. "My name is Tobias Drummond," he said. "I have a 10 o'clock with the site director. His name is Paul Fenwick. You can call up. We don't do that. You don't call up, not for walk-ins." Tobias looked at him steadily. "I'm not a walk-in. I'm the architect." Cole's expression didn't change. That was the thing about it. Not hostility exactly, more like a door that had been closed. For so long the hinges had rusted. He looked at the Carhartt jacket. He looked at the boots. He looked at the folder, which was battered at the corners and had a coffee ring on the front from sometime last November. "Sir, I need you to exit the building." "I designed this building," Tobias said. He said it quietly, not to make a scene, just because it was true and he thought it should be said. Cole reached for his arm. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. Cole's hand closed around Tobias's forearm. Tobias pulled back, not aggressively, just the instinct of a man who has not been grabbed since he was a teenager and found the sensation deeply wrong. Cole, reading the pullback as resistance, shifted his weight and pushed, and Tobias stumbled 2 steps to the left and caught himself on the welcome desk, his palm flat on the surface. The folder pressed against his chest. The woman behind the desk, young, dark hair, a headset around her neck, stood up from her chair. "What?" she started. "He's leaving," Cole said. "I'm not leaving," Tobias said. His voice was even. His hand was shaking slightly, though he didn't show it. "I want you to call Paul Fenwick and tell him Tobias Drummond is in the lobby. That's all I'm asking." Cole reached for him again. "Don't," Tobias said. It was a single word, and something in it stopped Cole for a moment. Not fear. Cole wasn't afraid of a 51-year-old man in work boots, but something in the register of it. The specific flatness of a person who has been through worse and knows exactly how far this can go. A small crowd had gathered without quite meaning to. 3 people near the elevator. The 2 women in blazers, now standing still with their coffee cups. A teenager near the fountain with a phone raised, not obviously recording, just held at chest height, pointed forward. Cole grabbed Tobias's jacket. Tobias didn't fight it. That was the thing that nobody who wasn't there would understand later, watching the footage. He didn't fight it. He let himself be pulled toward the door because he had been in rooms like this his whole life, and he understood, on some cellular level, that fighting was not the calculation that worked. His folder stayed tucked under his arm. His feet found purchase on the marble. He was being walked backward toward the glass doors, and he kept his eyes on Cole's face the whole time, not with anger, just with the particular attention of a man who is memorizing something. They were almost at the doors when the elevator opened. Paul Fenwick was 55, a site director who had been in commercial construction for 30 years. He was wearing a blue button-down and carrying a tablet, and he stepped out of the elevator mid-sentence, talking to the woman beside him, and then he stopped. He stopped completely. "Tobias!" Cole's grip loosened slightly. Paul Fenwick crossed the lobby in about 8 strides. He had the walk of someone who is used to rooms rearranging themselves when he enters, and right now the room was very much rearranging itself. "What is going on?" he said. It wasn't a question. Cole began to speak. "Sir, this individual was." "This individual," Paul said, "is Tobias Drummond. He is the lead architect on this project. He designed every square foot of what you're standing on. He looked at Cole the way you look at something you're not sure how to categorize. You put your hands on him." Cole's jaw moved. He didn't have ID. He wouldn't. "I told him who I was," Tobias said. He wasn't looking at Cole anymore. He was looking at the travertine ceiling, the particular way the light came through the atrium glass, the geometry of the space he had spent 4 years drawing and arguing over and losing sleep about. "I told him I designed the building." Silence. The teenager near the fountain lowered the phone slightly, then raised it again. Paul Fenwick turned to the woman who'd come down with him. She was the building manager. Her name was Sandra, and she had gone very still. "Get Halverson's office on the phone," he said. Now, what happened in the next hour would later be described in a company statement as a serious failure of protocol. Cole was removed from the premises before noon. The security firm that employed him was contacted by Halverson Properties' legal team within 2 days. By the end of the week, an internal review had been launched, not because Tobias Drummond asked for one, but because the video from the teenager's phone had been shared 40,000 times before Paul Fenwick even made it back upstairs. But that came later. What happened first was this. Paul Fenwick walked Tobias to the elevator. He didn't apologize 7 times the way guilty people do. He said, once, "I'm sorry that happened to you," and he said it looking at the floor, because he understood. Even if he would never fully understand, what it cost a man to walk into a room he made and be told he didn't belong there. Tobias didn't say anything for a moment. The elevator doors opened. "The curtain wall on the northeast corner," he said finally. "The expansion joint. I wanted to check it before the final inspection." Paul nodded. They went upstairs. Tobias Drummond grew up in Decatur, Georgia, the second of 4 children. His mother worked at a dry cleaners on Commerce Drive. His father drove for a regional freight company for 31 years and retired with bad knees and a good pension, and the specific pride of a man who had done exactly what he said he would do. They lived in a house his grandfather had built, not built as a metaphor, built literally, with his own hands, from a plan he drew on graph paper in 1959. Tobias used to study that plan as a child. He would take it out of the kitchen drawer, where it lived between the takeout menus and the telephone book, and he would spread it on the kitchen table and trace the rooms with his finger. The bedroom where his mother slept. The porch. The small addition on the back that his grandfather added in 1966 when his grandmother's sister came to live with them. He knew by the time he was 12 that he wanted to do this for a living. He also knew by the time he was 17 what the industry looked like for people who looked like him. He knew it the way you know certain things, before they happen to you, not from bitterness, but from information, from watching. From his cousin, who went into civil engineering and spent 6 years being mistaken for the delivery driver at client meetings. From reading in a magazine article someone left at the barber shop that less than 2% of licensed architects in the United States were black men. He went to Georgia Tech on a partial scholarship. He worked 20 hours a week at a restaurant near campus to cover the rest. He graduated with a 3.8 GPA and an offer from a firm in Atlanta that he accepted and then left after 3 years because he was tired of watching his designs get credited to colleagues who had contributed nothing but their names. He started his own firm at 34 with a business partner named Yusuf and a rented office above a copy shop on Auburn Avenue. The first 3 years were lean in the specific way that tests whether something is real. They were real. By the time Tobias was 40, the firm, Drummond and Quam Design, had won 2 regional architecture awards and completed projects in 4 states. By the time he was 48, they had designed a public library that was written about in 2 national publications and a community health center that won an AIA Honor Award. He still wore work boots to site visits. He had thought about this at various points in his life. Whether to change it, whether it mattered, whether the boots were a liability. He always came back to the same answer. He wore them because he went to sites. He went to sites because he believed architecture that isn't walked through isn't fully understood. The boots were not a statement. They were just boots. He had walked through Halverson Tower 17 times during construction. He knew which subcontractor had installed the mechanical room doors and which ones had cut corners on the threshold strips. He knew the exact sound the atrium made at 9 in the morning when the eastern light hit the glass a certain way. He had been in that building more hours than most people who worked there. Cole had never seen him before in his life. This is the part of the story that people got wrong in the comments, and the posts and the arguments that followed the video. They framed it as a mistake, as if Cole had simply failed to recognize an important person, and that was the error, the misidentification of status, as if the problem was that Tobias turned out to be someone. The problem wasn't the misidentification. The problem was the grab. The problem was that a man said, I have an appointment, and another man decided, based on what he saw and what he assumed from what he saw, that this statement did not deserve even the 30 seconds of verification it would have taken to make a phone call. The problem was that I am the architect was not a sentence that registered as possible. The problem was in the space between what Tobias said and what Cole heard, and in that space lived something that didn't have a comfortable name but that everyone watching the video recognized immediately, in their chest, before they could articulate it. The firm that employed Cole issued a statement saying he had been let go following an internal review, and that they took all incidents involving inappropriate use of force seriously. The statement did not use the word race. Neither did Cole, in the brief interview he gave to a local news outlet 3 weeks later, in which he said he had been doing his job, and that the situation had been blown out of proportion. Halverson Properties, for its part, announced a new security training program and a revised protocol requiring front desk staff to verify all appointments before security intervention. Paul Fenwick was quoted in the announcement saying that the company was committed to ensuring every visitor is treated with dignity and respect. Tobias gave one interview. It was to a podcast run by a nonprofit focused on diversity in the built environment. He sat in a recording studio in Midtown Atlanta and spoke for 40 minutes. And the part that got clipped and shared most widely was not about Cole, and not about the lobby, and not about what it felt like to be grabbed. It was this. I've been in hundreds of buildings I helped design, and I've been questioned in more of them than you'd think, not always physically. Sometimes it's just a look, a pause, the slight recalibration when you show up in person after months of phone calls and emails and the person on the other end had a different picture in their head. I'm used to that. What I'm not willing to do is make peace with the idea that being used to something means it's acceptable. He paused. My grandfather built a house from a plan he drew on graph paper. Nobody questioned whether he belonged in that house. I think about that a lot. The curtain wall on the northeast corner had a minor issue with one of the expansion joints, exactly what Tobias had suspected. It was documented, flagged for correction, and resolved before the final inspection. The building passed. It opened 3 months later. On the day of the opening, there was a small ceremony in the lobby. Tobias stood near the fountain and watched people walk through the space for the first time. And he watched their faces do the thing that faces do when a room is well designed. Not awe exactly, but a kind of ease, the unconscious sense that everything is where it should be. He stayed for about an hour. Then he picked up his folder, which still had the coffee ring on the front, and he walked out through the glass doors. He had 3 other projects on his desk: a school renovation in Savannah, a mixed-use development outside Birmingham, a small community center in a neighborhood in Memphis that reminded him, in its proportions and its ambitions, of the house his grandfather built. He had work to do. Paul Fenwick retired 2 years later. In his remarks at the retirement dinner, he talked about 30 years of buildings and the people who made them. He mentioned Tobias by name. He said, "There are architects who understand what a building is supposed to do technically, and there are architects who understand what a building is supposed to do for people. Once in a while, you meet someone who understands both. I was lucky enough to work with one. Tobias was in the audience. He nodded once. Cole was not mentioned, not because he didn't matter, but because the story was never really about him. The question nobody asked, not in the comments, not in the statements, not in the interview clips, was the one that stayed. Not what happened to Cole, not whether the training program worked, not whether Halverson properties had changed. The question was this: how many times had it happened before the camera was there? How many lobbies? How many mornings? How many times had a man picked up his folder from the floor and straightened the pages and gone upstairs to do his job and told no one? Because telling no one was the calculation that worked, and he had work to do, and the building wasn't going to design itself. How many architects? How many mornings? And how many buildings are you standing in right now? Designed by someone who was asked to leave before he could get to the elevator.